In this video, we're going to complete the KutaSoftware Infinite PreAlgebra free worksheet, adding and subtracting decimals. Now, for our first section, numbers 1 through 10, we're going to be finding each sum. And this is very similar to the previous worksheet where we added and subtracted integers. So the same kind of concepts still apply, except now we're dealing with fractions of a number. So in number 1, we have 5.4 plus a negative 9.7. We can think of this as adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. But it's difficult to think about 5.4 minus a 9.7. With integers, it might be a little bit easier to understand, and decimals, it gets a little trickier. But let's think about it. We know how to figure out whether this number is going to be positive or negative. And how do we know that? Well, it's all based on how far our numbers that are getting added to each other are away from 0. So the distance from 0. So 5.4, if we were looking at a number line, if 0 is here, 5.4 would fall approximately here. Whereas negative 9.7 would fall further away from 0. So the distance between 5.4 and 0 and 9.7 and 0 is different. This distance is greater. So because the distance of that negative number is greater, we know that our result of adding these two is also going to be negative. So 5.4 plus a negative 9.7 is going to result in a negative number. And think about this, 5.4 plus negative 9.7, we're moving to the left on that number line, 9.7. So here's 5.4, we're moving to the left, 9.7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Moving to the left, 9 would get us to, this would be 4.4, 3.4, 2.4, 1.4, 0.4. But then at 0.4, continuing to move over 1, 0.4 minus 1 would be negative 0.6. So now we're at negative 0.6, negative 1.6, negative 2.6, negative 3.6 is taking away a whole number 9, and 0.7 more will be negative, and here I'll draw 0.7 more, representing that this is 0.7 and all these are 1s. That would get us to a negative 4.3. And if that number line analogy confused you, let's go back to 5.4, and as opposed to starting off by going 1, let's go 0.4 over. If we go 0.4 over, that still is not quite 9.7. That's only 0.4. And if we have to move a total of 9.7, we still need to move 9.3. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if 0.4 gets us to 5, moving 9 over will get us to a negative 4. And then remember, we still need to move that extra 0.3. So here you can see my 0.3 and 0.4 gets me to 0.7. And all of these other jumps were whole number 1s. And we did 9 of those. So my solution in number 1 is a negative 4.3. Let's continue on to number 2. In number 2, right away, let's ask ourselves, is the result going to be positive or negative? Well, 10.8 is a greater distance than 4.73 is, or a negative 4.73 is, away from 0. So our result is going to be positive. And remember, adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. So we can just think of this as 10.8 minus 4.73. because adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. And I'm going to write 10.8 as 10.80. That way I can do my math and carry over. 0 minus 3, looking at this not tenths but hundredths column, we can't do that, so we're going to borrow from the tenths. So that becomes 7, this becomes 10. Now we can do 10 minus 3 will indeed give us 7. 7 minus 7 gives us 0. Keeping that decimal point in line, 10 minus 4 is 6. So our solution is a positive 6.07. And if you got confused with carrying over, I'll do a more in-depth review on that. But for now, you can think of how do we go from 0.8 if we subtract 0.73? Well, to get from 0.73 to 0.8, we would have to add a 0.07. So when subtracting, going the other way, we would have 0.07 left over. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3, right away, is it going to be a positive or negative number as our result? And it's negative because 0.5 or negative 0.5 is a greater distance from 0 than 0.3. So we know that we're going to have a negative number. Think about on a number line, if we had a negative 0.5, I'll place that approximately here, negative 0.5, here would be 0. And if we're moving 0.3, let's count by tenths. So this would be 0.1, 0.1, and another 0.1 to get 3 tenths. Negative 0.5 plus 0.1 gets us to negative 0.4, then to negative 0.3, and then finally to negative 0.2. So negative 0.2 is our solution in number 3. And let me just give you another tip that I think is going to be useful when doing larger numbers in your head, because the number line, especially when dealing with even larger numbers, is going to get confusing. We knew this number is negative. That's the first thing we could tell without really doing much math. And because we know it's negative, and these are opposite signs, so we have a negative here, and we're adding a positive here, so because they're opposite signs, we can go ahead and subtract the smaller one from the larger one. So if we treated 0.5 and subtracted 0.3, we'll get 0.2. But remember what I said, our resulting number is going to be negative, so we will need to write a negative here. Essentially what we did is we treated these as opposites. I took the opposite of this entire quantity. So I took a positive 0.5 and subtracted or added a negative 0.3. That gave me 0.2, but remember, I did the opposite, so I have to put my negative back at the end. Let's try that with number 4. Now in number 4, it's a little different because we have a negative and another negative. So we're going further into the negatives, meaning that our negative number is going to be even further from 0. So as opposed to subtracting like we did in number 3, we're going to add these quantities together, but remember, they're both negative. So essentially we're going to be adding 4.79 to 0.4, remembering that they're negative quantities, so the result is also going to be negative. So if I take 4.79 and I add that to 0.4, 0.79 plus 0.4 gives me 1.19. So I'll have 1 added to 4, which would give me 5. But remember, both of these were negative. So because I went from one negative number further into my negatives, this is going to be negative 5.19. Let's continue on to number 5. In number 5, I have 3.305 plus 1.7. Both are positive, and I'm adding, so I'm going to go further into the positives. So a greater distance from 0, so I'm going to just add these quantities together and keep them as positive. So 3.305 plus 1.7. I like to write it vertically to line my decimals up. So 0.305 plus 0.7, I'm going to have to carry over into my ones place, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So my 5, I still have 5 thousandths. I still have 0 hundredths, but 3 tenths plus 7 tenths is going to be 1. So I'll have 0 tenths, but a whole number 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. So my solution in number 5 is 5.005 or 5 and 5 thousandths, because this is the thousandths place. In number 6, let's practice that tip we talked about. What's this number going to be? Positive or negative? Well, negative 3.6 is a greater distance away from 0 than 0.43. And we have a negative, and we're adding it to a positive. And because we're adding that to a positive, we can treat this with subtraction, remembering that our resulting number is negative. So we'll take the larger value, 3.6, and subtract 0.43. Essentially what I did is I made this positive and I made this negative, but remember, that's the opposite of what I was given. So 3.6 minus 0.43, well, 0.60 minus 0.43 is going to give me a 0.17, or 17 hundredths. And 3 minus 0 is going to give me 3. But remember, this number is not positive, it's negative, because this was really a negative, and we were really adding a 0.43. So negative 3.17 is our solution in number 6. And again, think about this. This number is a greater distance from 0 than 43 hundredths. But because they're opposite signs and we're adding them together, we're not going further into the negatives, we're actually going closer to 0 when we're adding a positive number to our original negative number. So our resulting number is going to be a smaller distance from 0 than the greatest distance number here, which negative 3.6 is 0.43 hundredths further away from 0 than negative 3.17. So it makes sense that we would get a smaller distance from 0. In number 7, we have negative 4.3 plus 14.5. What's our resulting number going to be? Positive or negative? Positive, because 14.5 is a greater distance than negative 4.3 is away from 0. Now, let's go ahead and rewrite this since addition is commutative. 14.5, we'll start with 14.5 and add a negative 4.3. But remember from the last video, adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. So 14.5, we'll just subtract 4.3. 5 minus 3 is going to give us 2, or 5 tenths minus 3 tenths is 2 tenths, and 14 minus 4 is 10. So 10.2 is our solution in number 7. And if you think it's getting easier, it's probably because you're really learning and catching on. So let's go on to number 8. Number 8, what's our resulting number going to be? Positive or negative? Negative. That's right, because negative 7.1 is a greater distance from 0 than 3.63. And let me reiterate that. If I were to put 0 on the number line, 3.63 would be over here, whereas negative 7.1 would be somewhere all the way over here. This distance is greater than this distance. That's what I mean when I'm talking about distance from 0. And while I have my number line up, if we're adding a positive number to our negative number, we're going to move closer to 0. So we're going to move a distance of 3.63 in the direction of 0. So what I'm going to do is, I know that these are opposite signs, and I'm adding. Therefore, I'm just going to subtract the values without the negatives included, starting with my larger distance, taking away my smaller distance, and making sure that I have that as a negative number resulting. So I'll take my 7.1 and I'll subtract 3.63. So if I tried to subtract 0 from 3, starting with my hundredths place, I can't do that. So let's borrow from the tenths place, make that 0. 10 minus 3, we know, is 7. Now I can't take 6 away from 0, so I'll borrow from my ones place. My ones place, borrowing, will now become a 6, and this 0, if I'm keeping it equivalent to the thing I borrowed from, I need that to equal 1. But as far as tenths go, I need 10 tenths in order to equal one whole number. So now I'll have 10 minus 6, which is 4. And then 6 minus 3, I can do, that's 3. Now what I did is I took a positive 7.1 and subtracted a 3.63, which is the opposite of what is asked of me or what's required. So my result needs to be a negative 3.47. So here we would have on our number line negative 3.47. And that's after moving a distance of 3.63. Let's move on to number 9. In number 9, we have 13.7 plus 3.2, positive, and we're going further away from 0, further into those positives. So I'll just simply add these. 13.7 plus 3.2, 13 and 7 tenths plus 3 and 2 tenths, 7 tenths plus 2 tenths is 9 tenths, and I have 13 plus 3, which will be 16. So 16 and 9 tenths is my solution in number 9. Now let's look at number 10. Quick, positive or negative as a result? Negative, because we have negative 10.9, which is a greater distance from 0 than 6.1 is. So we know that we're going to have a negative number. So let's start with our larger value, subtract the smaller value, and make sure that we put our negative on at the end. So 10.9 minus 6.1, 9 tenths minus 1 tenth is 8 tenths, and 10 minus 6 is 4. And remember, our resulting number has to be negative. So this is a negative 4.8. Negative 4 and 8 tenths is our solution in number 10. Let's continue on to the next section. In this next section, we're going to be finding each difference. And it's very similar to addition, because remember, adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive, so subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative. So if we have 2.2 minus 7.3, we're starting in the positives on our number line at a positive 2.2. Here's 0 here, and we're going negative 7.3. So this distance is 2.2. So that's like going a distance of negative 2.2 if we made that jump all at once. But that's not quite subtracting 7.3. What would get us to 7.3? We would need another 5.1. So we would need to continue another 5.1 in the negative direction. So negative 5.1 would be our solution. And again, how I got that 5.1 is I know that 5.1 plus 2.2 gives me a positive 7.3. So if I'm subtracting, negative 5.1 plus a negative 2.2 gives me a negative 7.3. And again, remembering our trick from up above, or our helpful tip, we can simply think of this as our 2.2 is positive, and because we're subtracting 7.3, that's like adding a negative. So we have opposite signs, and if the opposite signs are added together, we'll take that larger number and subtract the smaller number. So 7.3 minus 2.2 will give us 5.1. But remember, our result isn't positive, it's really negative because our negative number, or the number that's subtracted, was greater than our positive number. So negative 5.1, again, is our solution in number 11. In number 12, you have negative 8.1 minus a negative. Right away, minus a negative is the same as adding a positive. Subtracting a negative is like adding a positive. So I'll rewrite this as negative 8.1 plus 8.9. And let's go ahead and rearrange. We'll have 8.9 plus a negative 8.1. And I rearrange this because adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. So we'll have 8.9 minus 8.1, which gives us 0.8. So 0.8 is our solution in number 12. All right, let's continue on to number 13. In number 13, we have 2.9 minus 9.4. Now remember, we're subtracting this 9.4, which means we're moving to the left on the number line. So you can think of this 9.4 as a negative number. So we're starting with a positive, and we're adding a negative, opposite signs. Remember, we can take the difference, but note that our result is going to be negative. And basically by doing that, in my head I'm saying, okay, from 2.9, if I'm subtracting 9.4, I'm starting at 2.9 on my number line. In order to get to 0, which is where I switch from positive to negative values, I need to move 2.9 over. But moving 2.9 to the left isn't moving that full 9.4 to the left. I still need to move some other number further. And I know that 9.4 minus 2.9, that's going to be an 8 minus 2 is 6. So that's going to be 6.5. But remember, I'm moving to the left. So that's negative 6.5. So moving to the left, 6.5 from 0 gets me to negative 6.5. So negative 6.5 is my solution. And I could have gotten that same way by starting just with this, 9.4 minus 2.9, and taking the opposite of that value I got, since I know that my number was going to be negative. But this diagram helps show why that math works. This total distance I moved was a negative 9.4, but in order to make it easier to see, I got rid of that 2.9. So I moved over a negative 2.9, or to the left 2.9, and I just had to figure out how much further I needed to move. So I'll take that moving, or that distance of 9.4, and I'll subtract out that 2.9 to give me my remaining distance. In number 14, I'm starting with a negative 3.9, and I'm going further into the negatives because I'm subtracting a positive number. So in order to do this one, I'll just add the values together. I'll just add those distances together. So a 3.9 plus 8.9, 9/10 plus 9/10 is 1.8, or 1 8/10. So I'll carry that 1. 1 plus 3 plus 8 is going to be 12. But remember, I started with a negative 3.9 and went further into the negatives, so increasing my distance, but remember that result is negative. So this is a negative 12.8. Let's continue on to the next page. Here I have a positive number and I'm subtracting another positive number, and this positive number is smaller than the number I'm subtracting from. So I know if I think of 9.8 as positive and 7.1 as negative, I'm going to have a positive number result. So 9.8 minus 7.1, 0.8 minus 0.1 is going to result in 0.7 or 7/10, and 9 minus 7 is 2. So 2 and 7/10 is my solution in number 15. In number 16, I have negative 18.278, or negative 18 and 278 thousandths, and I'm subtracting a negative 6 and 8/10. Subtracting a negative, right away, we're going to say add a positive. So negative 18.278, or 18 and 278 thousandths, we're going to add that to 6 and 8/10. Now, let's ask ourselves, what's our resulting number going to be? Negative or positive? Well, that's easy. Negative, because this distance is greater than this distance is from 0. So again, doing a quick number line depiction to show why this method works, we're going to have 0 here. We'll have negative 18 and 278 thousandths here. And remember, we're going a positive 6.8. So I know this distance because I labeled it as negative 18 and 278 thousandths. But I need to travel 6.8 this way. So I know that this distance is 6.8. But I care about my distance from 0. So I need to take the known distance, which is my larger number, and subtract that smaller distance to get the distance I want, which will give us the value we need. So my distance of 18.278, subtracting 6.8, making sure to keep my decimals in line. 2/10 minus 8/10 I can't do, but I'm going to borrow from that ones place so that I'll have 12/10 minus 8/10, which would be 4/10. And because I borrowed from that ones place as opposed to 18, I now only have 17. And 17 minus 6 is going to be 11. So I know that the distance from 0 is 11.478, but remember, we're to the left of 0, so that's a negative, is my solution in number 16. In number 17, I'm subtracting a negative, which is the same as adding a positive. And I know I'm repeating this a lot, but it's because I don't want you to forget these simple things. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive, and adding a positive is the same as subtracting a negative. So that's two different things. And then adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive, or subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative. Don't forget that, because that will constantly come up later in life and later in your math curriculum. So, subtracting a negative, adding a positive. So 17.9 plus 19.4, 9/10 plus 4/10 is 1 3/10, so carrying my 1. 9 plus 7 is 16, plus 1 is going to be 17, so carrying my 1 over into my tens place. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. So 37 3/10 is my solution in number 17. In number 18, we have 15.5, and we're taking away 15.5. If you have a total of something and you take away that entire amount, you get 0. This is probably the easiest one on this worksheet. 0 is a beautiful number. Let's move on to number 19. In number 19, we have 1.8, and we're taking away a negative 13.6. Subtracting the negative is the same as, go ahead and say it, adding a positive. So 1.58, or 1 58 hundredths, plus 13 6/10, or 60 hundredths. 8 hundredths plus 0 hundredths is 8 hundredths. 5 tenths plus 6 tenths is 11 tenths, or 1 1/10. And then I have 1 plus 1 plus 13, which is going to give me a positive 15. So 15 18 hundredths, or 15.18, is our solution in number 19. Now in number 20, I have a positive number and I'm subtracting a positive number. So we're starting with a positive number, but we're moving a greater distance into those negatives. So our result is going to be negative. So what I'm going to do is just see how far that distance was that we moved to the left of 0. So I'll take my distance of 17 17 hundredths, and I'll subtract some of the distance, 1.81, to see the total distance we had moved into the negatives. 7 minus 1 is 6. 1 minus 8, I can't do that, so I'll borrow. So I'll have 11 minus 8, which is 3, and then 6 minus 1 is 5, and 1 minus 0 is 1. 15 36 hundredths was how far we moved to the left of 0. So this is a negative 15.36, or negative 15 36 hundredths. And again, a real quick sketch on the number line. If we're starting at a positive 1.81, in order to get to 0, let me make this scale a little bit better. In order to get to 0, we had to move a negative 1.81, or a distance of 1.81 to the left. But that's not our total distance of 17.17 we need to move, so we needed to move some other distance, which is what we found to be a distance of 15.36 in order to move the total distance of 17.17. So negative 15.36 is our solution in number 20. Let's move on to our last 10 problems, where we're simply going to evaluate each expression. So we're going to have addition and subtraction. But remember, we can always add a negative or subtract a positive, subtract a negative, or add a positive. So let's go ahead and jump into number 21. At number 21, we have a positive, and we're adding another positive, so we're going further into those positives, so we'll just add those values together, and it's going to remain positive. So 19.4 plus 24.2, 4 tenths plus 2 tenths is 6 tenths, and then I have 19 plus 24, which is going to give me 43. So 43 6 tenths is our solution in number 21. Now we're cruising, here we go. Number 22, we have a negative number and we're subtracting a negative. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So, negative 14.8, we're going to be adding 9.7. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So negative 14.8 plus 9.7, are we going to have a negative answer or a positive answer? Negative, because the distance is greater with negative 14.8 than it is with 9.7 from 0. So I'll have to find the distance. We still are to the left of 0. So I'll take my values without the signs and subtract them. So 14.8 minus 9.7 is going to give me 5.1, or 5 1/10. But remember, our resulting number is going to be negative. So this is a negative 5.1. And quickly, I'll draw the number line one last time, but feel free to draw it if necessary. We're starting at a negative 14.8. 0 is all the way over here. We know the distance this way is a negative 14.8, but we need to go this way a positive 9.7. So we really need to find this distance here to get our result. So we'll take our larger distance of 14.8 and subtract that smaller distance of 9.7 to get our distance of 5.1, and it's to the left of 0, so that'll be a negative. Let's move on to number 23. 23, negative 9.1 plus 3.5. Our result is going to be negative. Good job, because our negative value is a greater distance than our positive value. So I'll take my distance of 9.1 and I'll subtract my distance of 3.5 to see how far to the left of 0 I still am. 9.1 minus 3.5, that's going to be 5.6. So I'm a negative 5.6. So negative 5.6 is my solution in number 23. A distance of 5 6/10 to the left of 0. And that result is a negative. In number 24, I have 96 hundredths minus 8 5/10. 8 5/10 is a greater distance than 96 hundredths. And when I'm subtracting an 8 5/10, I'm going to the left. So my result is going to be a negative number. And because this is a positive, and I'm essentially adding a negative, they're opposite signs. So again, I know that I'm looking for that distance of the difference between the values without the signs. So I'll have 8.5 and subtract 0.96. So I'll need to borrow in order to subtract. So this will become a 4/10, and this will become 10 hundredths, because 10 hundredths is equal to 1/10, and that's what I'm borrowing. 10 minus 6 is 4. Now I can't do 4 minus 9, so I'll have to borrow again, 1 away, but 1 is equivalent to 10/10, and 10 plus 4/10 is 14/10. So 14/10 minus 9/10 is going to be 5/10, and 7 minus 0 is 7. So I have 7 54 hundredths as that distance that I'm moving to the left past 0. So I moved 0.96 to get to 0, and then I have to move an additional 7.54 in order to move a total distance of 8.5, and remember, it's negative. So negative 7.54 is my solution in number 24. In number 25, subtracting a negative right away, adding a positive. So 9.5, we'll just add that to 19.3, which 9 5/10 plus 19 3/10. Well, I'll have 8/10, and then I'll have 9 plus 19, which will be a 28. So 28 8/10 is my solution in number 25. In number 26, subtracting a negative, go ahead and say it. I know it's tedious, but it will stick. Subtracting a negative, we're really adding a positive. So 3.4 plus 12.1, or 3 4/10 plus 12 1/10. That's going to give us 15 5/10. 15 5/10 is our solution in number 26. In number 27, we switch things up a bit because now we're going to be adding 3 numbers. But the same rules still apply. I'm adding a positive to a positive to a positive, so I keep moving further into those positives. So I'll start with 8.7 plus 3.8. You don't have to necessarily start that way though. You could start by adding 3.8 to 12.3 or 12.3 to 8.7. Either way is fine. I just like starting at the left. So 8 7/10 plus 3 8/10 is going to be 12 5/10. Because 8/10 plus 7/10 is 1 5/10. 8 plus 3 plus 1 5/10 is going to be 12 and 5/10. And I still need to add 12 and 3/10. 3/10 plus 5/10 is 8/10. 12 plus 12 is 24. So 24 and 8/10 is my solution in number 27. And go ahead and try adding a different way, and you should get the same exact answer. So try that now, and let me know in the comments below what you get. Oh, and while you're commenting below, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. All likes and subscriptions are greatly appreciated. And if you want more ways to support me, become a patron. Check out exclusive content on my Patreon page when you pledge. Until then, let's move on to number 28. Number 28, we have a negative 13.6 plus a positive 12 minus a negative. I like to rewrite all at the start. Subtracting a negative is the same as, go ahead and say it, adding a positive. So we'll have negative 13.6 plus 12 plus 15.5. Now the way in which we add doesn't really matter. So I'll go from left to right. Negative 13.6 plus 12. Negative 13.6 is a greater distance from 0 than 12 is. So I'm getting closer to 0 when I add 12, but I'm not quite going into my positive numbers yet. So let's find that distance that we are to the left of 0. So I'll take 13.6 and subtract 12. So that's going to result in 1.6. And remember, that's the distance we are to the left of 0 still. So negative 1.6 is the result of adding negative 13.6 and 12. But we still got to add 15.5 to that. So we have negative 1.6 plus 15.5, or 15 and 5/10. So we know our answer is going to be positive, because this negative number is a smaller distance than this positive number. So we're going to be a positive distance, or to the right of 0. And we can simply rewrite this. 15.5 plus a negative 1.6, that's the same as adding a negative is subtracting a positive. So I'll have 15.5 minus 1.6. Those are equivalent. 15.5 plus negative 1.6 is equivalent to 15.5 minus 1.6. So when I go ahead and subtract, I'll get 13.9 as my result. So 13 and 9/10 is my solution in number 28. And again, leave a comment below and try adding a different way. And I'll give you another hint. It's going to be very similar. AKA, it should be the same exact thing. If you don't get it, you might have done something wrong with your math. Leave your work below and I can double check for you. Let's go on to number 29. In number 29, we have 3.4 minus 5 minus 10.4. Now, subtraction is a little trickier than addition because we need to remember the terms that are subtracted continue to be subtracted or taken away. So if I try to do 5 minus 10.4, because I'm subtracting this 5, I can't treat it like a positive. So if I did this first, I would have to do negative 5 minus 10.4. Because think about that, 5 minus 10.4 is going to be a negative number, smaller than that larger distance, but negative 5 minus 10.4 is going to be larger than either of those distances away because we're moving further into the negatives. And this is the proper way of thinking about it. Now sometimes I'll even rewrite all my subtraction as adding negatives just to keep track of it. But in this case, as long as we work left from right, we should be safe. So 3.4 minus 5, we're going into the negatives because 5 is a greater distance than 3.4 and we're taking that away. So 3.4 minus 5, quickly in our head, 5 minus 3.4 is going to be a 1.6, but remember, we're to the left of 0, so that's a negative 1.6. So now we have negative 1.6 minus 10.4. Negative 1.6 minus 10.4. We're going further into the negatives because we're taking away that 10.4, so we can simply add those distances together and remember that they're negative. So 10.4 plus 1.6 results in 12, but remember both of those were negative, so we're 12 to the left of 0, which is a negative 12. Now on to our last problem, number 30. Negative 5.6 minus a negative 12 and 6/10 plus a negative 6 and 6/10. Let's go ahead and rewrite this right away. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So I'll have negative 5 and 6/10 plus 12 and 6/10 plus a negative 6 and 6/10. Now everything's added, and the order in which we add doesn't matter. However, we need to keep track of those negatives because negatives we're moving to the left. So like that issue I talked about in number 29, that 5 was subtracted, and so was that 10 and 4/10. So technically, each of those were moving to the left, so those were both negatives if we were talking in terms of addition. So even though we're subtracting a positive, we can think of that as adding a negative, and addition's commutative. So go ahead and try number 24 a different way if you'd like. But I like to work left to right just to keep track of things. So negative 5.6 plus 12.6, that's the same as if I were to rewrite this as 12 and 6/10 plus a negative 5 and 6/10, but adding a negative, subtracting the positive. So subtracting 5 and 6/10. I'll go ahead and do this first, and then I'll add on my negative 6 and 6/10. So 12.6 minus 5.6 is going to be 7. So I'll have 7 plus a negative 6 and 6/10. But again, remember, adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. So I can write this as 7 minus 6 and 6/10, which we know is 0.4 or 4/10. So 4/10 is my solution in number 30. And again, if you didn't do so at a previous point, like this video and subscribe to my channel. All likes and subscriptions are greatly appreciated. And if you want more ways to support me, become a patron. Click the Patreon link below to find out more.